I thought we'd talk a little bit about Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erdtree and kind of this new discussion around whether there should be a pause option in Elden Ring. And I thought we would lead off after that clip I just showed. That was me getting ganked in the Finger Ruins of Deo, which is a really annoying section of Shadow of the Erdtree. There's a lot of really hard parts in this expansion. I would still say that Elden Ring is the most accessible and most has the most options in terms of how you can play it and how you can overcome challenges, including the DLC, than any other FromSoft game. So, but I thought we'd start with Alanah Pearce, who has, sparked some discussion with some of the stuff she said. So I'm just going to play some of her video and then comment on it, and we'll just go from there. All right.
I have never understood why players would ever argue against more customization options. So this is the second half of this video, where I'm going to talk specifically about accessibility and even just a lot of people really not understanding the conversation about accessibility in Elden Ring. It has been brought up various times across various mediums by various people that Elden Ring is not, or FromSoft games in general, are not particularly accessible to disabled players. And people are asking for accessibility are not actually asking for an easy mode. That isn't the intent.
Okay. So that's good. I think that easy mode is built into the game, and I've talked about this before, but easy mode is basically when you summon or when you use your mimic tier or your various spirit ashes, but effectively the mimic tier is by far the best one. Easy mode is, when you level up, so that you're powerful enough, whether that's in, using runes or souls, as I call them still, to actually level up your stats and get better gear and level up your gear, or in the expansion, use the scattered tree fragments and the other blessing for your ashes, and you level up that way in the DLC. So there's lots of ways to make the game easier. Now, let's see what she means by accessible.
Here's the thing I want to spell out where accessibility is concerned. People who are disabled, I felt myself doing it, I'm going to do it, is another tangent. There are also multiple kinds of disabilities, especially where gaming is concerned. There are long-term disabilities, there are situational disabilities, there are temporary disabilities. It counts as a disability where a video game like Elden Ring is concerned if you have a kid. You have a 2-year-old, you're trying to play Elden Ring, you can't pause. That is a situational disability that you have, where the game not having the option for you to be able to pause, for example, is a hindrance for your particular disability, a situational disability.
So that's not a disability. It's a hindrance. Like she said, it's a hindrance. I remember many years ago when I was a young man and my daughter was like a baby. She's now 17 and I am not young anymore. But when I was and she was a baby, I had very little time to game. Like when kids are young, here's the thing. When kids are young, you just sort of lose your freedom, you lose your ability to do a lot of stuff that you could do before and that you will be able to do again when they get older. Although there's always going to be more of a burden on you when you have children. That's just the way it is. When I was very young and my daughter was a baby and I would try to get game time in, but I also had to watch her, that I would not consider that a disability or a situational disability. I would consider that definitely a hindrance because I remember putting her in her little playpen. Like, cool, there you go. There's your playpen. I'm going to play Team Fortress 2, maybe some Counter-Strike Source. And I was 5 feet away from her, right, on my computer. But the moment I started playing, she's crying. She needs something. She's upset that I'm not paying attention to her, And that's it. Like, pause or no pause, you're just not going to be able to play. And, of course, in games like the ones I mentioned, of course, you don't have pause because it's a multiplayer game. And I think what people are missing about... There's a couple things when it comes to FromSoft games. There's no pause, partly because these are multiplayer games. I know you can play them single player. They are fundamentally large single player games with a multiplayer component. But when people say, well, when you're offline, you should be able to pause, I think it misses a huge point about how these games are designed. You're asking for a completely different type of game than the one you would be playing online, and that just doesn't make sense. That to the core design questions of Elden Ring, Dark Souls, all of those games, you do not have the option to pause because that's just not the way these games are built. right? And here's what you have to understand. Just like you have to sacrifice when you have a family, when you have kids that you have to watch, when you have your game time interrupted by those small children, in Dark Souls and Elden Ring, in these games, you also have to learn to let go. That's the fundamental lesson of these games is essentially this ability to let go. You're going to die. Let go. You're going to lose your souls. Let it go. It's okay. This too shall pass. There's a very, for all their difficulty, for all the punishing level of difficulty, and especially in some boss fights in some areas, there is a sort of Zen Buddhist underpinning to these games, which is this idea that life is cyclical, that death is coming for us all, and that we have to be able to let go of our possessions, of our struggles, and all of those things, and we just have to come to terms with that. That's good. That's okay. And if your 2-year-old is causing a ruckus and you're in the middle of a fight, well, you just have to go take care of your 2-year-old. You chose to play this game. You chose this game to play rather than Mario Brothers or something where you can pause it, right? You didn't have to play Elden Ring when you have a 2-year-old running around. You could play something else. That's one of those sacrifices we make as parents. When my kids were little, I did not have a lot of game time, and I didn't, and now I have a lot more now that they're older and they just want to do their own thing and they don't want to hang out with me that much. I'm not bitter about that. Now I have lots more time. Of course, I'm super busy with just everything in life, so it's hard. It's still hard to fit in as much game time as I would like, but I can do that uninterrupted. And that's not because I was in a situational disability. It was because when you have little kids, you have to make a lot of sacrifices. You can't go out to the bars with your friends. You can't do this. You can't do that. You don't get as much sleep. You have to hold a little living being in your arms all the time and try to get them to sleep and change their diaper. Not a disability. Let's continue listening.
You may need to pause to stop your kid from putting a fork into a socket, a power outlet. In Australia, we call power outlets PowerPoints. But when I moved to the US, I got bullied for that because people thought that I was referring to like a PowerPoint slideshow. So
people will bully people over the strangest things. But that is kind of funny that they call them PowerPoints in Australia. Australians, man, I don't even know what to say.
Trying to get that one out of my vocab. And there are temporary disabilities. You break your wrist, you sprain your wrist, you temporarily have trouble playing video games. You would need something to help you press certain buttons if you're playing Elden Ring. The third one...
Okay, but also, if you break your wrist, you might just have to not play video games for a while. That's just life. I mean, like, when I broke my ankle, I couldn't run anymore. When I broke my ankle, I could barely keep up with my friends, going down the hall. This was in high school. I haven't broken anything since. When you break shit, when you break your hand, sometimes you just have to give up the things you love for a little while. Again, this is not a disability per se. I think she's about to come to the long-term disability. Those are the ones that are actual disabilities. A temporary inconvenience, I don't think games should cater to people who have broken wrists. Sorry that you broke your wrist. It sucks. It hurts, and it's a pain in the ass for a long time. But it's just a game. Remember, these are just video games we're talking about. And I do want to talk more about the pause thing. When I say it's core to the design of the game, whether or not you're in multiplayer or not, this is one level of difficulty in the game. This is one aspect of difficulty in the game that I think is fundamentally crucial to the experience. There are many games that you can pause, right? And you can play those when you have a 2-year-old, when you have other issues in your life that are temporary. You can play those and pause them to your heart's content. But in Souls, there is this idea that the only way you're allowed to pause the game, and you can pause the game, but the only way you're allowed to do it is to quit the game, right? You can quit the game. You can go right over to settings, exit the game. And when you turn it back on, it will start right where you left off. And you can go to a bonfire or a site of grace. Sorry, Elden Ring. Bonfire just works better. And you can go to that, and you can go into the site of grace. You can even fast travel in this game straight over to one. Boom. You're basically paused. You're safe. So there are ways to pause. It's just a little bit inconvenient. And that's part of the nature of this game. Again, I think you lose something that makes this game special when you ask for stuff that is not part of the core experience. And not being able to pause is part of the core experience. again, having those options I just discussed has always been how you pause this game. And, anyways, all right.
Long-term people who have long-term disabilities that I do. I have tendonitis in both of my wrists from playing too many video games. Unironically, that is a thing, from tapping too much. That means any rapid button mashing in any game, I'm going to have a lot of trouble with unless there are accessibility options to prevent that.
I don't know what those options would be or what they would look like in Elden Ring. This is a tricky one because, again, I would say that there are so many games that have a lot of accessibility options. I don't think it's the end of the world if just a couple games are more inaccessible. Yeah, it sucks if it hurts to rapidly button mash, but again, like you can play builds that don't require as much of that. Like, and the only thing I could see that would help you get away from having to do that is some form of God mode or some form of, where you don't take damage or you automatically dodge or you put it in an easy mode. I mean, which is pretty much what that is. Like, to add an accessibility option to Elden Ring that would make it so that you didn't have to press the buttons so much, I don't know what that would be, because you have to block, you have to dodge, you have to attack, and all of those things sometimes you have to do very quickly. And so unless there's some sort of like auto dodge option, but if you put that in, that is effectively an easy mode. And then how do you reconcile that with the multiplayer components? Because again, this is like, you could say, okay, in Call of Duty, you want all the accessibility options and everything for the single player campaign, but then once you're in the multiplayer portion of it, how do you can't really have as many accessibility options because they create an unlevel playing field. And the same thing applies to a game where you're being invaded and having PvP stuff going on in Elden Ring. You could say that these are only available in offline mode, but I guarantee you, if you only made them available in offline mode, people, if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want a glass of milk, and that's exactly what's going to happen. People are going to say, well, I want to be able to play multiplayer with all the accessibility options. And then you run into an issue where people are having an unlevel playing field in multiplayer, and that, it just fundamentally does not work.
What I worked on God of War Ragnarok, that's part of why I made an accessibility award show to like highlight this particular thing. Is like, I have a lot of trouble with fighting games. I have a lot of trouble with any game that's really button mashy. If there are too many button prompts, I'm going to be in pain and have to like ice my wrists afterwards and not really be able to play it. And here's the thing about accessibility in Elden Ring, where any of those things are concerned. I think there's a misunderstanding that people think disabled gamers, whoever else, want an easy mode. This is not the case. It's that the appeal of Elden Ring being really fucking hard is also appealing to people with disabilities. They too want to play the extremely hard game that is very hard for them to beat. They're not asking you to give them an easy mode and make it easy for them to get through. They're asking for a version of the game that can be played with their particular disabilities.
And I get that, but I've seen some gamers play this like one-handed. I've seen, there's some amazing stuff online that you can watch people play this with all kinds of like ridiculous ways to make it more difficult. The question again, and I don't think she actually provides an answer to this. I will actually skip ahead because I've watched this video already. She talks about having something at the end of the game when you beat it that shows how you beat it, so that you have bragging rights. Like, you didn't use this, you didn't summon, you didn't use accessibility options, you beat it fair and square, so that you have that, and other people can beat it their own way. And I think, again, since there are so many options to beat it, that makes sense, and that's cool. But I think once you take a game like Elden Ring or Dark Souls and this is why I've always been against an easy mode. When you take that and you add these accessibility options, and again, I don't know what these would be exactly, other than making it easier, because you would have to fundamentally change how the game works. If you can't press buttons a lot, you're going to have to put in some kind of God mode or something, or some auto dodge, and that is an easy mode. I mean, I'm sorry, you can call it accessibility, but it is an easy mode. And then once you do that, you take something that very few games have at all. Like, there are so few games that have a universal experience for everyone, because most games have an easy mode and a hard mode. So a lot of games have 5 different easy, medium, blah, 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 like all the different options. These games don't. They have one difficulty setting, and then you have a lot of ways to tinker with that in the game itself to make it harder, easier, or whatever. I would have to see like what exactly people are calling for, because she doesn't really specify it in this video other than saying we need those options and then something to show how you beat it. But the other thing that I think the other problem is temptation, right? You get to a hard boss, it's so tempting to say, okay, I'm just gonna click on this option and now I can beat him, right? If there were difficulty settings in these games, people would always do that. They would do that so often. Very few people would play on the most on the normal difficulty setting. And if you have those accessibility options or whatever, that's what people are going to turn to when they get stuck. And again, that breaks the game. That breaks the experience. It's very tempting when you're stuck to want to do that. And I think that, again, there's just so few games that actually require this level of play, that why do we have to change them? Why do we have to change them to make them more accessible when the 99% of games are already very accessible? And just this one little batch, this one tiny corner. Now look, I don't mean to be callous with that, right? I'm not as good at these games as I used to be. I mean, I guess I'm better in some ways, but I'm getting older. I get tired faster. I'm not as quick. My reflexes aren't as good. My eyes aren't as good. I'm no 15-year-old, right? Like when I play like Call of Duty or competitive shooters, I'm never going to be as good as a lot of these players, right? No matter how much I practice. Age, if you want to get right down to it, is a disability, right? Getting older, your body in many ways fails you. Your brain fails you. Everything starts to fail you in little ways. You're more tired. You're more, you're achy, everything, or you get tendonitis or whatever happens, arthritis, all the little problems. But look, at a certain point, you have to say, okay, like I don't need to be able to do everything. There are things that are going to be beyond my ability, beyond what I can access, because my hands are shot, my back is shot, my knees are shot, my eyes are bad, whatever it is. And that sucks. And I'm glad that there are so many steps companies have taken to create controllers. There's those accessibility controllers that Microsoft came out with. There's a bunch of different things. And I think it's great. I think it's great that there are more options for more people. But I think there's this race to the bottom with the lowest common denominator of everything needs to be everything for everybody all the time. And yes, I understand disabled gamers want to play these very, very hard games. They want that ability. They want some access options. And I think to a point, I think those are great. And I think that we should have more of that. But on another level, I don't understand. I still don't understand. And I'm not getting that answer of what you could do for Elden Ring to make it more accessible other than an easy mode. And you might not call it easy mode, but once you start adding in stuff that, like larger dodge windows and all that kind of stuff, that is easy mode. I mean, that is fundamentally just easy mode. So I don't know. And then the pause option again, why can't you do it when you're offline? Well, because the nature of the game is one in which you don't get to just stop the game and walk away from it. You have to play. You have to be present, because someone could come, an enemy could come out and attack you while you're dicking around over there or helping your kid out. And then the nature of the game is also one in which you're supposed to learn to let go and accept defeat and strive to overcome it next time. If you have to go help your kid out and you die and you lose 50,000 souls, that's a lesson. That's a learning lesson. Next time, maybe you'll figure out a better way to handle that when your kid's around, right? You're going to lose. You're going to die. Accept it. Accept it and find peace with it and move on. And if we change the nature of the game to one where those are no longer the fundamental lessons, the morals, the ethos, whatever, then it's no longer the game that we love. And it's like people in relationships. They get into a relationship with somebody, they love this person because they're so cool and but then they try to change them. They change them and they change them and they change them, and 5 years later they're like, I don't love this person. This isn't the person I fell in love with. It's because you changed them. You worked your ass off for 5 years changing them. Now this person's not the same anymore, and you're not in love with them anymore because of it. Like, these games wouldn't be so popular. They wouldn't be so engrossing and captivating if they were changed to fit all of these things people want. You don't get what you want in this life. And that's another thing. Like, you don't always get it. You don't always get what you want. You don't always get convenience. You don't always have access. And like, learning to like accept that is a huge part of learning to be a person who can actually thrive in this world. So that's my 2 cents. And I try to be empathetic, but I also think we just cannot water everything down until it's no longer what makes it special, because then nothing is special anymore. So let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and peace.